The neon never slept on the strip. It burned through the desert dark, like something that had decided electricity was a permanent condition, not a luxury. Cadillacs lined the valet circle at the sands. Women in silk dresses moved through smoke-thick lobbies. Men in expensive suits studied each other the way predators study one another, with extreme politeness and zero trust. This was Las Vegas in 1963. The Rat Pack was at its absolute zenith. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, and at the center of it all, quiet and effortless, the man who made cool look like it required no effort whatsoever, Dean Martin. Dean didn't walk into rooms. He arrived in them. There was a difference, and everybody in Vegas understood instinctively. Other men entered spaces. Dean claimed them, not through aggression or declaration, but through something harder to quantify and infinitely more dangerous. The settled, unhurried certainty of a man who knew exactly what he was worth and had never once felt the need to prove it to a stranger. He was 36 years old. He'd survived poverty in Steubenville, Ohio. He'd survived the hungry years before anyone knew his name. He'd survived the dissolution of his partnership with Jerry Lewis, which the press had predicted would end his career, and which had instead revealed something nobody expected. Dean Martin alone was more powerful than Dean Martin with anyone else. He was funny without trying to be funny. He was charming without deploying charm as a tactic. He sang like the music came from somewhere deeper than training, somewhere that had nothing to do with technique. And he was loyal to his people the way the desert is loyal to heat. That loyalty, that uncompromising, uncalculating loyalty, was about to be tested in a way nobody could have anticipated. Not Dean. Not the men who thought they understood him. Not the 12 men in a warehouse on the industrial edge of the city who were about to make the worst decision of their collective lives. It had started 3 weeks earlier, quietly, the way most serious trouble starts. Not with a shout, but with a discrepancy in a ledger. $2 million had evaporated from a private entertainment investment pool. The fund was one of those elegant shadow structures that Las Vegas excelled at producing. Legitimate enough on paper, murky enough in practice to give serious men a way to move money through the city without leaving clear fingerprints. Bookings, side guarantees, performance bonuses, revenue splits, all of it technically legal, all of it strategically imprecise. Dean's name had surface in connection with the pool, not as a suspect in any formal sense, not as someone the police were looking at. His name had surfaced the way a chess piece gets moved across a board, deliberately, purposefully, by someone who wanted leverage over him and had decided that proximity to a large sum of missing money was the most elegant way to create it. The men who surfaced his name were not random opportunists. They were 3 representatives of a quiet money organization operating out of Phoenix. Careful men, men who wore their violence the way good tailors wear suits, invisibly but always present. They called themselves investors. Their actual business was pressure. They identified powerful, connected people and manufactured reasons those people suddenly needed friends in the right places. Dean had met with them at a corner table in the Sands Casino Lounge on a Tuesday evening. He'd listened. He'd watched. He'd taken 3 sips of his drink in 90 minutes, which told anyone who knew how to read him that he wasn't remotely relaxed. He'd said almost nothing. He asked a few quiet questions about the nature of the alleged discrepancy. He'd stood up when the conversation reached a certain temperature, thanked the men for their time in the tone of voice a man uses when he means a precise opposite of thank you, and walked away. He'd gone directly to his hotel suite afterward and spent 40 minutes on the telephone. The 3 men from Phoenix watched him go and made an assumption that would prove catastrophically incorrect. They assumed that his silence meant fear. They interpreted his measured walk and his even expression as the behavior of someone who had decided it wasn't worth fighting. They did not understand that when Dean Martin went quiet, it wasn't because he'd surrendered. It was because he was thinking 3 moves ahead and didn't want them to see his face while he was doing it. The call came in at 11:47 on a Thursday night. Dean was in his suite, jacket off, tie loosened, going through notes with Jack and Tratter about the following week's show schedule. Only a handful of people had the direct number to that suite. When the phone rang, Dean picked it up on the second ring. He listened. His expression didn't collapse. It didn't shatter into panic or crumble into fear. His jaw set. His eyes went somewhere else. Not absent, but calculating, moving through possibilities the way a chess grandmaster moves through the board 3 seconds after his opponent touches a piece. His wife had gone down to the lobby an hour earlier to meet a friend for a late dinner. Her purse had been found in a service alley behind the casino. No robbery. Her wallet was still inside. No witnesses. No disturbance. Just a purse and a message, delivered through a valet who was shaking visibly as he related it. If Dean wants her back, he comes alone. The valet handed over a piece of paper with an address on it. An industrial warehouse near the edge of the city. Far from the lights. Far from the noise. Far from the kind of place where people would hear anything that happened inside. Jack and Tratter was on his feet before Dean had finished reading the paper. We call the police. We call Frank. We call. No, Dean said. One syllable. Absolute. Dean. They wanted to call someone, Dean said, his voice entirely level. They've thought about what happens if I call someone. Whatever they've set up in there, it's designed for me to bring backup. That's what they're expecting. That's where their plan starts. He looked at the address on the paper for another moment. If I go alone, I'm outside their plan, he said. Outside their plan is where I want to be. He put on his jacket. He straightened his tie. He checked one thing, just one thing, in the inside pocket of his jacket. Then he walked out of the suite without looking back. He drove himself. A black Cadillac, no passengers. He took a specific route that took him past 2 places he needed to check. He stopped once, briefly, at a payphone. The call lasted less than 90 seconds. He didn't explain what he was doing to the person who answered. He gave 2 pieces of information and hung up. Then he drove to the warehouse. The building sat at the end of a dead industrial road, one of those forgotten strips of commercial real estate that Las Vegas produced occasionally when its growth outpaced its planning. A warehouse that housed equipment for a failed construction company, now empty except for the 12 men who had arranged themselves inside it and the single woman they had tied to a support beam near the back. They were not random criminals. They had been assembled specifically for this purpose, recruited from different corners of the Southwest by the 3 men from Phoenix who wanted Dean Martin taught a lesson about what happens when powerful people decide they are too good to be leveraged. Some of them were ex-enforcers from organized networks that had moved to the desert looking for work after their previous arrangements dried up. Some were local muscle, men who had proven useful in the past for situations requiring intimidation without too much ambition. A few were simply large and violent and had been told the pay was good. Their leader was a man named Garrison. He was the kind of man who had been using his physical size as a substitute for intelligence his entire adult life, and it had worked well enough that he'd never discovered the distinction. He was in his 40s, broad across the shoulders, with the easy confidence of someone who had spent 30 years winning situations where the only variable was willingness to hurt people. They had beer. They had cigarettes. They had harsh yellow bulbs overhead casting everything in the flat, unflattering light of a place designed for storage rather than human occupation. They'd been waiting 40 minutes by the time headlights swept through the gap in the warehouse's rolling door. Garrison watched the black Cadillac park through a window. He watched the driver's door open. He watched one man get out. He watched that man button his jacket and walk toward the entrance without looking around to check who might be watching, without hesitating, without any of the behavioral signals that a frightened person produces automatically. He watched Dean Martin walk alone into a building containing 12 men, a hostage, and the assembled certainty of people who had never lost an encounter like this one. Garrison grinned at the man next to him. Somebody laughed. Then somebody else. Then all of them. A room full of men who had confused their own numbers with invulnerability, who had confused Dean Martin's composure for ignorance, who had decided, in the moment before anything had actually happened, that they had already won. The laughter moved through the warehouse the way water moves through a cracked foundation. Fast, casual, with no awareness at all of what it was flowing toward. Dean had noticed it on his way in. It was on the exterior of the building, mounted to the left of the main entrance, a standard industrial breaker panel, the kind that controls all overhead lighting for a structure this size. He'd paused beside it for exactly 3 seconds. Not conspicuously, not in the manner of someone announcing that they were doing something relevant. He'd simply paused, the way a man pauses when he's reading an address to make sure he has the right building. 3 seconds. Then he'd walked inside. He'd scanned the room without appearing to scan it. 12 men. He counted without counting. The way you develop an instinct for the geometry of a room when you spend enough of your life in bars and back rooms and places where trouble arrives without announcement. His wife was at the back, hand behind her, frightened but physically intact. He registered that first, before he registered anything else, and the precise quality of the thing that loosened in his chest when he confirmed she was unharmed was not visible on his face. Garrison stepped forward. The laughter was still dying down in the room. The way laughter dies in a place where it was being used as a weapon. Didn't bring Sinatra with you? Garrison said. Dean looked at his wife. She gave the smallest possible nod. Alive, unharmed, watching him. That was enough. He looked back at Garrison with an expression that hadn't changed in temperature. I don't need Sinatra, Dean said. He said it the way you say something that is simply a fact, not a boast, not a performance, a statement of conditions. Garrison's smile stayed in place, but something shifted behind it. He'd been prepared for bravado, for threats, for performative aggression of a man trying to talk his way out of an impossible situation. What he wasn't prepared for was a particular quality of Dean Martin's stillness. It wasn't the stillness of a frightened man trying not to show fear. It was the stillness of a man who had already solved the problem and was waiting for the situation to catch up to a solution. You walked in here alone, Garrison said. You understand what that means. It means I'm exactly where I want to be, Dean said. And then the lights went out. Total darkness. Industrial-grade absence of light. No windows. No ambient glow from the outside reaching the interior. Nothing except the sudden absolute black of a room full of men who had organized themselves entirely around visibility. The laughter stopped. Someone said something that was half word and half curse. Then something crashed, not distant, not across the room, immediately proximate, the sound of something heavy meeting concrete with purpose. A body hit the floor. Dean had grown up in Steubenville. He'd worked in pool halls and back rooms. He'd been in fights before he understood what a career was, before anyone in the entertainment industry would have recognized his name. He wasn't a movie action hero. He wasn't trained in any formal system. What he had was something more useful than training in a situation like this. The absolute unhurried calm of a man who had planned this exact moment and was now simply executing the plan he'd already run through in his head. He moved along the wall, not through the center of the room. The center of the room was where panicked men would swing. The wall was where nobody expected a single person to be. He used the confusion, the shouting, the sound of bodies moving blindly into each other, the crash of an overturned crate, as cover for movement that would have been impossible in light. He struck once, moved, struck again, moved. A flashlight beam snapped on across the room, wild and sweeping, finding nothing useful. Too late. 2 men were already on the ground. A third was shouting that he couldn't find the wall. Gunfire cracked to the dark. 3 shots, panicked, completely undirected. The sound of men shooting at darkness, because shooting at darkness felt better than admitting they had lost control of the situation they believed was impossibly weighted in their favor. Dean went low. He pressed himself behind a row of crates along the east wall and stayed absolutely still. And in the silence between the panicked shots, he could hear the breathing of the room changing. Faster, shallower, the specific respiratory signature of men who were suddenly frightened. He let them be frightened. He let the silence sit. Let the darkness work on them. 40 seconds of complete stillness from his position was more destabilizing than anything he could have done with movement. In the dark, with 2 of their number already down, with no sense of where the single man they'd invited in was located, 12 became 10 and 10 became something closer to 5 in terms of practical effectiveness. Then emergency lighting flickered on, dim, amber, the minimum illumination that industrial safety codes required. Enough to see shapes. Not enough to see clearly. Dean was already moving. He came out of the crate section at a walk. Not a run. Not a combat advance. A walk. Because running implies urgency, and urgency implies desperation. And Dean Martin was not desperate. He was precisely where his plan required him to be. For men were on the ground. 3 more had backed toward the far wall in the amber half-light. Uncertain, no longer laughing. watching the center of the room with a specific expression of people who revised their initial assessment of a situation and found the revision profoundly unsettling. Garrison had his arm around Dean's wife. He had a gun at her temple. He was breathing harder than he'd planned to be. The ease that had been in his posture when Dean walked in had been replaced with something rigid and reactive. The posture of a man who was improvising. "Drop it," Garrison said. "Whatever you've got, put it down. Now." Dean stopped walking. He slowly reached into his jacket and removed a metal rod he'd picked up from a tool rack near the breaker box when he paused outside. He set it on the ground with care, like he was placing something breakable. "Hands up," Garrison said. Dean raised his hands. The men who were still functional circled him. They were rough about it. Hits to the ribs, a blow across the back of his knee that took one leg briefly out from under him, the taste of blood from a split lip where someone's elbow found his face in the dim light. They were making a statement. They were reasserting the narrative that had been running in their heads when he walked in. This is a man being broken. This is what happens to men who come alone. Dean took it. He took it and stayed on his feet and counted. He was watching Garrison. Specifically, he was watching Garrison's eyes. When a man is threatening someone and also managing multiple other things, the position of his men, the stability of his leverage, his own confidence in an outcome that has gone more sideways than expected, his attention divides. It can't not divide. Human attention is not capable of full distribution. It concentrates, and then it shifts, and there is a moment between concentration and shift when the field narrows. Garrison's eyes moved left, just slightly, checking on the men behind Dean. Dean moved. He pivoted from where his knee was still in contact with the ground and came up fast, grabbing Garrison's gun wrist with both hands. The grip of someone who has done this before, not with formal training, but with a genuine article. Actual necessity in actual moments. He twisted. The gun fired upward, into the ceiling, harmless. He drove his shoulder into Garrison's chest and used the man's own mass against him, momentum doing the work that force would have required. The room exploded. What followed lasted approximately 90 seconds and did not resemble anything choreographed. Someone broke a bottle. Dean used one man as a shield when another rushed him. A third tripped over one of the men, already down, and contributed to the arithmetic of the situation by taking himself out of it. Two more ran, not toward Dean, but toward the entrance, which had more to do with what the last 4 minutes had done to their morale than anything about their physical safety. When it was over, there were two men still standing. Then one. Then Garrison, on his knees, looking up. Dean crouched down slightly so that Garrison didn't have to look up as far. It was a small thing. It was not a gesture of mercy. It was a gesture of precision. He wanted Garrison to hear what he was about to say clearly, without the added noise of physical discomfort making the words harder to process. Vegas doesn't belong to boys who confuse noise with power, Dean said. His voice was entirely level. No performance in it. No rage. The specific, controlled tone of a man delivering information rather than emotion. Garrison lowered his eyes. The gun dropped from his fingers. "Where do we go from here?" Garrison asked. He wasn't trying to negotiate. He was genuinely asking. "You're going to tell me who hired you?" Dean said. "The names from Phoenix. All three. You're going to tell me what the arrangement was, what they paid you, what they promised, what they told you the end game looked like. And you're going to tell me everything exactly once, because I'm going to verify every word. And if anything doesn't line up, I'm going to find you again in a city where I know considerably more people than you do." Garrison told him everything. It took 11 minutes. Dean listened without interrupting. He didn't write anything down. He had the kind of memory that records what matters automatically and releases the rest. When Garrison finished, Dean stood up. "Police are on their way," he said. "That call I made on the way here. When they arrive, you're going to tell them a group of men broke in and things got out of hand. You're not going to mention my name, not because I need to be protected, but because if my name appears in a police report connected to this location, the men in Phoenix will know exactly what you told me, and then your problem won't be the police." He looked at Garrison for a long moment. "I'm giving you a way out," Dean said. "Don't mistake it for weakness." He crossed the room to where his wife was still secured to the support beam. He untied her himself. She held on to him, and he held her back, and neither of them said anything for a moment, because some things don't need words to be understood. Then he walked to the Cadillac, and they drove back toward the lights of the Strip. Dean did not move publicly on the three men from Phoenix. That was never the plan. Public moves were for people who needed the satisfaction of being seen. Dean needed results. Within 48 hours, the three men from Phoenix discovered that their entertainment investment pool had been audited by two separate accounting firms, both of which produced reports with findings sufficiently serious that several of their silent partners quietly withdrew. Not loudly, not with accusations. They simply withdrew the way money withdraws when it becomes uncomfortable, invisibly and completely. Within a week, two of the three men received phone calls from business contacts in cities where they had significant ongoing arrangements. The calls communicated, in various forms of polite indirection, that certain partnerships would need to be reconsidered in light of recent events. The events were never specified. They need to be, in the world these men operated in, unspecified references to recent events were the loudest possible language. The third man received something more direct. A single photograph, placed on his desk in his Phoenix office, slipped under the door by someone he never identified. The photograph was of the warehouse. It was dated. It had been taken from a distance by someone he had never authorized to be anywhere near that location. The message was not subtle and was not intended to be. Dean Martin had been there. Dean Martin had documentation. Dean Martin had decided, in his measured and unhurried way, that the three men from Phoenix were not worth destroying, because people who are destroyed become martyrs in complicated investigations and ongoing nuisances. But they were also not people he intended to leave free to make this mistake twice. None of the three men ever made this mistake again. Word moved through Vegas the way electricity moves through a circuit, fast and visible, and impossible to stop once it found a path. By Friday night, 2 days after the warehouse, every serious person in Las Vegas had heard a version of what happened. The details varied. In some versions, Dean had fought every one of the 12 men individually. In some versions, he'd arrived with a plan so complete that the men never had a real chance. In some versions, he'd said things at the end that were so measured and so final that the men in question had required considerable time to recover their composure. None of the versions were entirely accurate. All of them contained the essential truth. What mattered wasn't the specifics. What mattered was the architecture of the story. One man, alone, walking into a situation designed to break him, and walking out having broken the situation instead. What mattered was that Dean Martin had not called for help, had not hidden, had not negotiated from a position of desperation or fear. He had simply arrived, solved it, left. The entertainers who heard the story understood something that the muscle for a hire crowd sometimes failed to grasp. There was a reason men like Dean Martin commanded the rooms they walked into. It wasn't the fame. Fame was a surface, a shimmer, a projection. Beneath the fame, there was something structural, something load-bearing. A man who had decided, at some foundational level, that his dignity was not negotiable and that the people he loved were worth any cost he could possibly be asked to pay. The muscle for a hire crowd thought in terms of numbers. How many men, how many guns, who had more of each? Dean thought in different terms entirely. He thought in terms of what a person is actually willing to do when everything else falls away. Garrison had thought he was managing a celebrity. He'd been managing something else entirely and hadn't known it until the lights went out. The Copa room at the Sands was at capacity on a Saturday night. 2,000 people in their finest. The air thick with perfume and cigarette smoke, and a specific anticipatory electricity that comes from a room full of people who believe they're about to see something genuinely worth seeing. Dean Martin walked out onto the stage at 11 minutes past 9. Perfect tuxedo. Not a mark visible on him that suggested the events of Thursday had been real. He moved the way he always moved, as if the stage were a natural condition of his existence, a habitat rather than a performance space. He adjusted the microphone stand. He looked at the audience the way he always looked at the audience, not performing the act of seeing them, but actually seeing them, which was different and which the audience could feel without being able to articulate why. He picked up his glass, took a sip, set it down. Then he opened his mouth and began to sing. The song was Everybody Loves Somebody. He'd been performing it for years. The crowd knew it. They leaned in as they always leaned in, pulled by something in the quality of his voice that no one had ever quite managed to technically describe, a warmth that didn't reach for them, that simply existed at a certain temperature and let them come to it. They saw the performance. Las Vegas saw something else. Las Vegas saw a man who had been offered fear and had declined it, who had been handed a situation designed to demonstrate his vulnerability and had instead demonstrated the exact opposite, who had walked into a building full of men who believed the celebrity was a whole of him and who had shown them the remainder. The part underneath the songs and the smile and the effortless charm, the part that had survived Steubenville and the hungry years and the decades of learning who he was and what he valued and what he would not compromise. Respect isn't given because you're famous. It's given because when the lights go down and the noise stops and there's nothing left but what you actually are, you're still standing. And you're still exactly who you said you were. When the last note died and the Copper Room came to its feet, Dean Martin smiled. That particular smile, the one that didn't quite reach his eyes but occupied his face with such easy confidence that you almost forgot to look for what was behind it. He bowed once. He stepped back from the microphone. And in the desert night, in the city that never slept, in the kingdom of neon and calculated risk and men who thought they understood power, the legend of that Thursday warehouse settled permanently into the record. Years passed. The Rat Pack moved through its golden era and into the long descending years when time did what time does to everything, not destroying it, but making it historical rather than present. The sands eventually came down. The Copper Room became a memory. The Strip changed faces the way Vegas always had, where its past is nostalgia and its future is neon. But the story of that August Thursday in 1963 stayed in the city's memory the way certain things stay. Not because it was the largest story, not because it had the most moving parts or the highest stakes, but because it illustrated something about a specific kind of character that people recognize instinctively even when they can't describe it in precise terms. A man had been given the choice between the two fundamental options available in a dangerous situation: send for help or go yourself. He had looked at those two options. He had understood that the first option was designed for, expected, and incorporated into the plans of the people threatening him. He had understood that the second option was outside their planning, which meant it was the only territory in which he had any real advantage. He had also understood something more personal than strategy. He had understood that there are moments when what you do is what you are, and that this was one of those moments. That walking into that warehouse alone wasn't just a tactical decision. It was a declaration of what he valued and what he would pay for those values. His wife, her safety, her dignity. These things were not negotiable. The 12 men who laughed when he walked in alone had made an assumption that nearly every person makes about nearly every celebrity, every performer, every public face. They assumed that the surface was a whole story, that the charm and the talent and the ease were the substance of man, rather than properties of a surface beneath which something considerably harder and more permanent was doing the actual work. They had been wrong. They discovered their error in the dark, in the specific language of a warehouse where things had stopped going according to plan, where the absence of light had given one man a decisive advantage over 12. Not because of physical superiority, but because one of them had already solved the problem before he walked through the door. That is the real legacy of that night, not the details of the confrontation. Not the count of men on the ground or the particular words spoken to Garrison in the amber emergency lighting. The legacy is simpler and more durable than any of those specifics. The legacy is this: sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is walk through the door without backup, trusting that who they actually are is sufficient for what the room requires. Dean Martin walked into that warehouse with 12 men who had decided he was less than he appeared to be. He walked out having proven to them and to himself and to the city that was listening that he was considerably more. And on the stage of the Copper Room 2 nights later, when 2,000 people heard him sing, they were hearing someone who already knew it. Some men talk about who they are. Some men sing about it. And some men, the ones that cities remember long after the neon finally goes dark, simply walk through the door, alone, and make it mean something that lasts. Las Vegas, summer 1963. The night 12 men laughed at a man walking alone and learned that the most dangerous thing in any room is a man who has already decided what he's willing to lose.